科学を信じるか、神を信じるかという論争は、科学と神は相反するものだという前提の上に成り立っていましたが、最近、ユーロピアン・フィジックス・ジャーナル誌に発表された宇宙モデルによると、この状況が変わりつつあることが示唆されます。この新しい宇宙モデルは、自然法則に幾何学的なパターンを割り当てています。科学の教科書には、光の速度や電子の質量など数式は載っていても、例えば E イコールコット MC2 乗が存在しないように、科学の中に神様を見出すことはできません。今まで科学は神を必要としてきませんでした。自然法則は物理学や科学のように独立した分野としては位置づけられておらず、私たちは日常の中で漠然と自然の法則という言葉を使っていますが、この宇宙モデルでは自然には固有の法則があり、その法則は物理学よりもはるかに深いレベルで働いていることを示唆しています。もし既存の科学よりも深い法則があるとすれば、その法則、つまり自然の法則の中にこそ神の手を見出すことができるかもしれないのです。今日はこの理論を構築したマルコム・マクラウドさんにお話を伺っていきたいと思います。この宇宙モデルの概要を詳しく教えていただけますか
？Well, the scaffolding of our universe seems to be made from mass, space, and time. We could call these the building blocks of our universe. Within this mass, space, and time scaffolding, we have particles like electrons and protons, and these in turn combine to form planets and stars. What this mathematical electron model does is assign geometrical objects to mass, space, and time. These objects are chosen so that the mass object can combine with a length object and with a time object to form more complex objects, such as the electron. And so the electron has mass, wavelength, charge, and frequency because it incorporates these basic geometrical objects for mass, length, charge, and time. And from electrons, we can build the rest of the universe. But it all starts with these basic objects for mass, space, and time.
この理論では、幾何学的なオブジェクトが自然法則の基礎を形作り、その自然法則の基礎が物理法則よりも仮想の領域で働いているということですが、それは具体的にどういうことでしょうか
？There is a theoretical world called the Planck scale. The Planck scale is to the quantum world, as our macro world of planets and stars is to the quantum world. Why I say theoretical is because physics really has no tools that can go much below the quantum world. And so physics has no way to know if this Planck world even exists. And so the testable laws of physics end at the quantum level. The premise of this model is that nature operates at this Planck level. And so if you want to understand the quantum world, or relativity, or gravity, then you have to begin with this Planck world. This means you have to study nature, and not just nature as an independent branch of science, but nature is the root level of all of our sciences.
では、冒頭で触れた科学か神かの論争はどういったふうにこの数理電子モデルに関わってくるのでしょうか
Because the model works well until we actually build that electron using these shapes. What happens then is that the physical universe disappears, and the electron was clearly designed this way, how I'll explain in a minute. But when you study these objects, it is hard to avoid the conclusion that they are the result of intelligence. And not only that, the mythology used by this intelligence, it's far, far beyond our technical level. And so returning to that electron, we can measure very accurately its mass, its wavelength, and charge, those parameters we associate with it. However, we still don't know what the electron itself is. If you Google what is the electron, most of the answers will describe those parameters. At most, they may mention that the electron is a point, but we don't know what does that mean. What is a point? And so for physics, the electron itself, like God, is a matter of faith. We assume that there is an electron, but that is only because we can measure its parameters. We cannot detect the electron itself. Now, to measure something means to take an aspect and assign a value to it. The aspect could be color and the value red, or temperature and the value 100 degrees. For science, the fundamental aspects, those fundamental to the universe itself, they seem to be mass, length, time, and charge. We measure mass in units such as pounds or kilograms, time in seconds, length in miles or meters, charge in amperes. This model assigns geometrical objects for these units, these kilograms, meters, seconds. But the objects do not just represent those units, they are these units. The mass object is mass, the time object is time. And this means that when we combine these objects to form a complex object, for example, the electron, embedded within the electron are these units. And this is why we can measure electron wavelength using meters, electron mass using kilograms. But the actual electron itself has no units. And so the electron cannot be measured. There are these physical electron parameters of wavelength and charge and so forth. But there's no physical electron. What defines a physical universe is that it can be defined. And so if there is nothing to measure, then it's not there. In our macro scale of planets and stars, mass is separate from time and length. I cannot measure the distance from New York to London using kilograms or amperes. But at the level that nature works, this Planck scale, I can measure distance using mass and time. Using those objects for mass and time. This is because these objects are not independent of each other at the Planck scale. They overlap and they cancel and then disappear in a certain ratio. And that ratio is found in the electron.
今お伺いした話だと、物理的な電子は存在しないということになりますが、電子と呼ばれているものは実質的に存在しないということですか？
Well, what you find is that even although the electron is made up of physical units, the electron itself is just a mathematical formula, nothing more. You can write it on paper, but you cannot hold it in your hand. The electron is a mathematical particle. It is not a physical particle. And if our material universe is made up of mathematical particles, then our material universe is a mathematical universe.
宇宙の中にいる私たちからは物質的な宇宙が見えているけれど、外側から見ると宇宙は存在しないということですか？
Yes, if we can combine mass, space, and time to get nothing, as we see with the electron, then from nothing we can make mass, space, and time. We've been talking for a few minutes now, which means that the universe had to create time. But to do this, the universe also had to create mass and space in order to balance that nothing ratio. And so as we speak, the universe is getting bigger and more massive. If time went backwards, then the universe would have to shrink. But regardless of what date in history you choose, the sum universe, that total of mass, space, and time, would always cancel to nothing.
そうすると宇宙は今、例えば昨日の状態よりも大きく巨大化しているということですね。
Yes, the universe is not a closed system. Furthermore, if the universe grows larger using the same algorithm as life forms, then the universe may still be evolving in complexity. By this definition, the universe is also not just getting larger. The universe itself is growing. And speaking of larger, it may be doing this at the speed of light, which is why the speed of light is the fastest possible speed. And so it may be that as the universe expands at the speed of light, it pulls us, our particles, along with it. And so we too may be traveling at the speed of light as I speak. And if we are traveling at the speed of light, then perhaps light itself is not traveling at all.
光ではなく、私たちが動いているから光が動いているように見えるっていうことですか？このどこに神様が入ってくるんでしょうか？
Let us suppose I am asked to write a weather simulation program. I will need inputs like temperature, wind, humidity, etc. To forecast the weather, but myself, I don't appear anywhere in that program. I'm not needed. But the existence of that program source code can be used as an evidence for the existence of me, the programmer. And so when we examine these geometrical objects and the way they are used, we get the impression that we're looking at parts of a source code. Evidence of a source code embedded within the laws of nature could then be construed as evidence of a programmer. And this programmer, by definition, is God in the creator of the universe context.
まさにプログラマーゴッドですね。
Yes.
映画マトリックスのような印象を受けます。
With these geometrical objects as the programming language. I should also point out that these objects do work well. We can use them to precisely calculate the speed of light, the mass of the electron, and so on. But we have no mathematical theories that can explain why these objects work. They just do. There's much to be done, but if this object approach can be used to explain our universe, then it could be considered as our first evidence of a non-human intelligence. In other words, evidence of a God.
なぜ数学が使われているんでしょうか。数学が使われているということから、そのプログラマーゴッドの世界について何か推測できることはあるんでしょうか。
Well, we use programming languages like C++ and Java, and so it may be that mathematics itself is simply the programming language that was used to write this universe source code. And if so, then mathematics may be not an absolute concept in of itself. Our boundaries, what we're capable of, what would then be dictated, and of course limited, by this source code.
物理学と自然にはどういった違いがあるのか教えていただけますか？
Well, the electron has this geometrical shape as does the proton. And so electrons orbit protons according to the respective electron-proton geometries. Because that orbit follows a regular pattern, we can observe it and make a formula to describe it. And so the formulas of physics would be our observations of these underlying geometrical patterns. The more complex the patterns, the more complex our formulas. Science requires an observation to be reproducible. We theorize that water boils at 100 degrees C, and every experiment we have done confirms this. But there's no reason why the source code of the universe needs to be restricted to repeating patterns. There could be backdoors built into the code where we do this with our programs. And so non-repeating patterns, which we would call miracles, may be perfectly valid.
まだ少し時間が残っていますが、最後に何か言っておきたいことはありますか？
We cannot assume that these laws of nature are just the operating system. They may be more involved. After all, if this is a simulation, there may be a purpose for it. And this, we could call it a higher purpose, may be built in. Ignoring nature, therefore, could have consequences that are, well, not to our liking.